5 people are in police custody, while a 6th has turned state witness following the murder of Abongile Mafalala after a mob accused him of trying to snatch a child. Now, just a warning that this following report by Nasipi Same does contain some graphic and upsetting detail.
5 suspects in the Parkwood vigilante mob that allegedly killed 31-year-old Abongile Mafalala appeared in the Wynberg Magistrates Court. His distraught family wants justice and believe that the attack was racially motivated.
The only thing I hate is racism, because I believe if it was really colored, bebeza mamel. Only one person will be black. No one mamel.
Because why do I understand? Even if, let's say, he did the thing, why did they take all of his stuff? Like, they take the khakis, they even take the trouser. Innocent. That's why I even said I will get justice for him, because he was innocent. He was innocent, 100%. I'm 100% sure about that. We're going to kill him and take the car, all that stuff. Then what happened? Then the community of that base hear the noise, and then they come to us, guys, what's happening? What's happening here? And then the response of these guys, they say, he's the one who's kidnapping our children. That guy is a responsible man. First, I can say that he always work hard for what he wants. He's a good person. Good person. He never hurt anyone. Never.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and thank you very much for joining me here again today. Today is an incredibly sad day, and a sad tale has to be told, and it breaks my heart. But before we do get into that, last week we spoke about a man who went to prison for murder, then escaped prison, continued to murder, and is probably one of Limpopo's worst serial killers. So if you haven't seen that, I will link it up here. But sadly for today, violence in our country is not new, and we have all experienced it or witnessed it in some shape or form. But it really does break my heart how cruel we can be. But today we're going to talk about the murder, the public murder and public execution of a man who was completely innocent. This man was just doing his job, and he was not helped, left for dead, and not even given the opportunity to say what he had to say. But with that being said, let's get into today's case.
Intended for mature audiences only.
Today we are heading to an area in Cape Town, South Africa called Parkwood, and it seemed like an ordinary day where an e-hailing cab driver was called on a cell phone app, and he was requested to come and pick up someone in Parkwood. And the cab driver who responded to the e-hailing call, his name was Abongile Mafalala, and he responded to this call for the pickup. And we're going to try something a little different, and I'm going to show you the picture of the aftermath. So we can start off first by you having an idea of how brutal and violent this case is going to get, and you can probably guess and assume what might happen. But let me tell you, it is absolutely worse and more vile than what you think it is. This image speaks 1,000 words, because if you really look at the image, you can see firstly the burnt car, burnt so hot that the tires have melted, there's no glass, and sadly next to the burnt out car is the body of an innocent man. So let's get into what happened in Parkwood on this fateful day. On the 31st of May 2022, so very recently, a man was called, like I said, via an app to come and pick up a few people from the area of Parkwood. But Abongile Mafalala then responded to this call, and he then headed out towards Parkwood to pick up the people that was requesting the drive. Abongile Mafalala was 31 years old at the time, and he was married at the time with one baby back at home. Abongile lived with his wife in an area called Dunoon, which is also here in Cape Town. And just like many of the men and women who choose this specific line of work, it's long hours and you often have no idea who's going to get in the back of your car. So like I said, Abongile then arrives in Parkwood and either 2 or 3 people get into the back of the car. And I'll explain this a little bit later. But there are a few people in the back of his taxi. Abongile at the time was driving a white Avanza, so it was definitely a bigger vehicle and could carry a lot more people. Now, as Abongile is trying to leave Parkwood, on the left-hand side of his vehicle, of the Avanza, is like an open field, and right in front of you, getting out of Parkwood, is like a set of traffic lights, and then on the other side of the road is also a set of traffic lights because you're kind of at a 3-way stop, so he can either turn left or right at the stop. So, he's at the robots now, but he actually can't get out because a taxi is blocking his exit. So Abongile thought this was a bit strange, so he then heads onto the pavement, onto this grassy area to try and get around the taxi to then try and get out. But Abongile is doing this very slowly because, like I said, he's got passengers in the car and ratings are of utmost importance, especially for e-hailing type of taxi drivers. But all of a sudden, before he can even get off, the people in the back of the car then notice a mob of people, like a lot of people heading towards Abongile's car. The people at the back of the car then get out and Abongile is absolutely surrounded by a mob of people. Apparently, the age range of the people who were surrounding Abongile's car was from late teens all the way to around 40 and younger. So like in between 19 and 40 in that age group. But what I do just want to say that everything we are going to talk about next is hearsay, because from this point in time, the case is still very fresh and still very active, and everyone who we are going to talk about is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Now, Abongile is absolutely surrounded, and I cannot imagine the fear that he must be going through right now. Now, Abongile is surrounded by people. They're busy bashing on the bonnet, bashing on the windows, and they're shouting at Abongile to release the baby. Let the baby go, stop coming in our area, release the baby. Because apparently, when Abongile was driving away with passengers in the car, remember, people thought that they heard a baby screaming in the back of the car. So the people who were involved in this mob were trying to stop Abongile from leaving because they thought that he had now kidnapped a baby. So before we get into exactly what happened to Abongile, let's give some context. First bit of context is that there are conflicting reports about who was in the back. Some reports say that there were 3 people in the back and they were around 20, 30 years old, the 3 people. But another report, and most of the reports, say that the people in the back were a dad and a son who were in the back of Abongile's car. And to be fair, it does make sense that there were 2, the dad and the son, in the back of the car, because apparently the dad and the son kept urging Abongile just leave and to go to Grassy Park police station in order to report his innocence and to try and get the mob off his back that he didn't kidnap a baby. And second bit of context is gang activity. Now, we haven't really spoken about gang activity on this channel, but we really should. And it should be more prevalent because gang activity is really rife in South Africa, but particularly in the Western Cape. And in Parkwood, yes, there is gang activity there. And there are often gang altercations and there is violence, such as shootings, robberies, and murders. And in communities in South Africa where there is not a very high police presence, because the police also fear for their safety, and this is very difficult for the people who live in these communities, because police refuse to enter where they may be shot up and killed, because if the criminals are willing to shoot each other and to just murder in broad daylight, the police know that these criminals will just turn a gun on them just as easily. But the point here is that people then don't get protected by the people who are supposed to protect and serve us. We expect police to be able to protect us, but when they refuse to go into certain areas out of fear themselves, what else do community members do? But in instances like this is where mob activity as well as kangaroo courts run rife, and then kangaroo courts will then take justice into their own hands. And last bit of context, Kidnappings in Cape Town specifically are really rife at the moment. Also in other provinces in South Africa, there's a lot of kidnappings as well as held for ransom kind of crimes. And it is an absolutely real threat for people just walking down the street and people taking taxis such as e-hailing taxis or just normal taxis every day. So people in our province need to be completely alert at all times, even when just going to and from places. So now with all that context in there about gangs, kangaroo courts, kidnappings, we can now get back to Abongile. Abongile has now been accused of kidnapping, trying to leave Parkwood. He has now been blocked. His car cannot leave. Abongile is professing his innocence and absolute confusion as to what this mob is accusing him of. The mob then drag Abongile out of the Savanza and drag him to the ground and take him a bit further away from the car. And this mob absolutely beats Abongile mercilessly. They took bricks, stones, they threw it against him, and they took pipes and beat him in the head with it. They also took their feet, kicked and jumped on him. Anything they could do, the mob did to try and hurt and kill Abongile. Apparently, a lot of people also stood by and watched as this was all going down, but also a lot of people say that there was a younger kind of blocking of the older people. So a lot of younger people were on the surroundings or on the outskirts of the circle that was now watching Abongile be beaten to death. And older people were trying to pull the youngsters away and stop them from doing this, but they were being pushed away and they were trying to control this kangaroo court by themselves. And Abongile was now being beaten to death of an apparent kidnapping of a baby that just happened to vanish into thin air. And if they believed that he was part of a kidnapping syndicate, then maybe that's why they were beating him to death, because they thought that he was coming back into the area in order to kidnap more people. So Abongile is now lying on the ground, bloody, bruised, and close to death. The mob then turns their sights to Abongile's vehicle. They then set this car alight and they then drag his body closer to the vehicle, also setting Abongile alight. By doing this, the mob then ensured that Abongile's death was painful, prolonged, and absolutely agonizing. Now, the community, for the most part, I do believe, was quite horrified by what took place, and there were two men in the community who were quite high up in and respected. And these two men would later be questioned by the news and the reporters who would come and report on the case. And these men were Pastor Charles Williams and community leader Rashad Allen. And they were two very well-known figures in Parkwood who were apparently the first people residents would usually call where gang fights would break out, and they would try and intervene and try and defuse the situations. However, on Tuesday, when Abongile was being beaten to death, unfortunately, Pastor Williams had arrived too late and he was unable to defuse the situation. Pastor Williams then said, quote, "Had I arrived earlier, I would have saved the life of the driver. The people would have listened to me. Myself and Rashad are the two people who break up fights and any conflicts in our community. I am disgusted by what happened." End quote. Pastor Williams and Rashad Allen are really trying to still emphasize how important it is that Uber drivers and other taxi drivers know that it is safe to come into Parkwood and that they will try and ensure that this never happens again. He also emphasized that for years, Uber drivers and other taxis have been coming in and out of Parkwood when no one has ever tried to do this to any of them. But after the death of Abongile, police absolutely swarmed Parkwood and the area was surrounded by police. The community was on very high alert and the tension in the area was very high. A lot of people also really didn't want to come forward. They didn't trust police and they didn't trust that the gang leaders also wouldn't turn on them. A couple of days after Abongile's death, so many videos were released because people would rather record horrible incidents than call for help. But lots and lots of videos were released and police could now see who was involved and what was happening and what really happened to Abongile. And since those videos have been released, a lot of people have been arrested for the murder. But the first to be arrested was probably not someone that you expected. The main suspect believed to have started this all was a 19-year-old female who was arrested on the 7th of June 2022. And she was charged fully with the murder of Abongile Mafalala. Police say that it is believed that the woman initiated the attack on Abongile because she kept shouting that this was the man in the van whose apparent Avanza is the same car driving around Cape Town and is linked to recent kidnappings. And she called for justice in the Parkwood community and incited the attack that led to the death of Abongile. She was also responsible for spreading the video footage of the brutal attack. In the video, this young woman is also seen beating Abongile in the face with a pole consistently. And this is all while Abongile lay helpless on the ground. She, amongst others, have been arrested for the murder of Abongile, and these others are Nathan Lehman, Ivan Navat, Bradley Murphy, Colton Williams, and Ashwin Tiflin. And since the arrest of these men, another 3 men have been arrested, but they have not been named as of yet. So there have been a total of 9 people arrested for the death of Abongile, and apparently one of these men have turned state witness, but during the trial we'll see how that goes. The 9 are then made to appear in court on Monday the 13th of June, this week coming. So this will be another case that we will follow up with. However, this type of crime in a country that is so tense is bound to have consequences between the communities that were involved in this crime. And I say this because actually a counsellor went to visit the family of Abongile, and when the news was there to have a look at what she was doing, she then said to the news, quote, "The community of Dunoon will continue to hold a grudge against Parkwood for condemning an innocent man to death. Abongile's murder was planned, and the community wants all of those involved to pay for what they did. The people who pretended to be passengers had planned everything. They had mistaken Abongile's Avanza with the one that had been trending on social media as the car of prospective kidnappers." End quote. Apparently, the community of Dunoon wished to visit Parkwood in order to understand exactly why they did what they did. And the community of Dunoon also wants to speak to Parkwood community in order to understand why they never gave Abongile a chance to explain himself before they brutally beat him to death. Sadly, Abongile's sister said that their family had lost their main breadwinner, and it is just such a clear and obvious ripple effect that the senseless crime has on Abongile's family. And yes, Abongile Mafalala was innocent. He was never connected by police in any kidnapping syndicate. He just happened to have the same color car as that was trending on social media at the time. The community of Parkwood also held a vigil for Abongile and his family. And actually, I drove past Parkwood the other day coming back from work, and I noticed these white flags right on the M5, like right as you're driving past. They're right there. And it is so close to the freeway where he could have just driven over the pavement and he would have been gone. But the mob had surrounded him with just inches of freedom right there at his grasp. And seeing these white flags in a circle surrounding this burnt area so close to freedom is just so tragic that Abongile had to suffer such an horrific fate based on the fate of mistaken identity. But we will keep an eye on this case, and we will talk about it once the trial has finished later on this year, if all goes according to schedule. But like we said, the 9 are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. But with that all being said, I hope you all have a great weekend further. Please stay safe out there and be vigilant, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.